Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to spend the next 45 minutes talking about maximizing the value of your data. We got an incredible panel here and a lot of experience, and it's going to be a great way to migrate everybody over to the Getty Villas. I hope everybody's having a great day. So just kind of what we're going to cover in this panel is looking at data-driven transformations, really kind of anchoring on all the opportunity, the focus areas, what's changed in the last 12 months, and getting some great advice from our panelists on how to do that and the opportunities it provides for customers and investors. And when we think about data at EY, we really are focusing on three tightly intersected pillars. And our panelists cover that quite well. Talking about the intelligence layer, really where does that hit the end experience? The data itself, how is it stored, how is it accessed, and then importantly, the cloud and the security layer that kind of brings it all together. One of the recent surveys we've been looking at, notwithstanding all the economic uncertainty, 60% of companies out there are looking to increase their spend on data and cloud, but really looking about driving that ROI. So I'm going to kind of turn it over maybe with Rohit to start off. Why don't you give us a little bit of about Excel data, where you're focusing, and how you see your role in the data-driven transformation?
Yeah, I mean, before we talk about Excel data, I'm just going to outline three massive trends that we are seeing, and we were here about 12 months back. And, the macro trends continue, that, the volume of data is just exploding for every single enterprise. The systems are getting more and more complex. More pieces of technology are getting introduced every 12 months than they were ever before. And there's not enough number of, people or engineers who you can find. So these three macro trends continue. Talent is the flat line, I wish there were more engineers, etc. So that's basically, the situation of where we are right now. What Excel data does is essentially gives you visibility into all your data pipelines, which, according to me, are the modern supply chains of the world. People are determining what needs to be done in a business operationally to reach out to customers, to serve your customers better through data. And that supply chain needs optimization, especially as you head towards a multi-technology hybrid cloud world. And we basically are building the next generation of Datadog, providing visibility into your complex data pipelines. So that's what we do. And these trends really work for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Rohit. Matt, we spent a lot of time talking at lunch. Introduce Immuta to the group and your focus on the data-driven transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matt Carroll, I'm CEO of Immuta. We're a data security platform, so think of us as natively embedded into cloud compute infrastructure, where we're automating regulatory contractual compliance for predominantly Global 2000. And when you think of that, think about who's accessing your data and why, and should they be? And that's kind of the ultimate question we're asking.
Jordan?
Good.
Yeah, I'm Jordan Tagani, CEO of MotherDuck, and we're building a serverless data analytics platform based on an open source DuckDB. One way of thinking about it is, we're kind of Snowflake, but for the data sizes that people actually have, not the data sizes they think they might have.
Cody.
Awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Cody Coleman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Coactive AI. And we make it super easy to analyze and search visual content by bringing structured to unstructured data. And kind of the macro trend that we're seeing for kind of many different enterprises in the world around us is that increasingly more and more of our everyday life is being captured by images and videos. You think about the rise of TikTok, the rise of e-commerce. People are consuming content and making buying decisions based off of images and videos. But historically, leveraging this data has been almost a non-starter for companies. All they can do is they can actually just store the data, and you need a completely different set of tools in order to actually derive value from that data. And what we're doing at Coactive is bridging that gap, so you can kind of plug in this massive ocean of data. When we think about visual data, it's 80% of internet traffic, and it's 80% of enterprise data. How do we bring that into the world, the data teams, the tools that you're already kind of building? Thank you.
Super. So kick off the discussion. Matt and Rohit, we were on a similar panel about a year ago at the March Capital Summit. A lot has gone on in the last year. Maybe, Matt, take us off. Kind of how are you seeing how the market changed from a buyer's perspective around their data transformations?
Yeah, I mean, actually, you got to build a real company, I guess, is what's changed. Like, I think what we're seeing is point solutions across the board are being consolidated. The capital to be able, and especially the Global 2000, to be able to buy a large stack to build your data infrastructure is just not viable anymore.
Yep.
So you actually have to provide top-line value, right, to the business, whether it's cost controls or whether you're driving revenue. But the CISO, the CDO, they can't buy 30 to 40 tools and put it together. Something I'm calling integration fatigue. They just don't have the resources to continue to constantly integrate new capabilities. So, kind of like classic mid-90s IBM stack, we're seeing there'll be 4 or 5 breadwinners in each category in the middleware, the core data infrastructure set, and then you'll have tool layer above that. So it's really no different. History is kind of repeating itself with a liquidity crunch. So, in our customers like JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley or to like a Sanofi or Pfizer, we're seeing consistent across all the verticals of this tool consolidation. Startup ecosystem is not going to be able to raise capital, so they actually have to provide real value where they can manage their COGS but still get retain that value and continue to drive increased expansion of these accounts. And so I think like if I could kind of summarize it is simplified deployment, right? So investments in R&D, increased alliances with large GSIs who are going to penetrate markets, and the rest of them are going to die.
It's kind of interesting as to what's going on right now. I think there's a lot more focus on value as opposed to just deploying solutions because they look good. I think execs are under pressure because they're losing 2 things and in very quick succession. They're actually losing headcount, and the second is budget. And when you lose access to all of that, but you're still actually investing in the long-term trend of data, and it actually needs to meet a revenue goal very, very clearly. So whether it's an operational focus on marketing, advertising, or improving customer success or something, it has to be very, very pointed. But I don't see the trend of, let's say, cloud transformation slowing down anytime soon. I think that ship has sailed.
Right. So kind of a more focused execution, more short-term ROI. And turn it to Jordan. You recently wrote a blog, Big Data is Dead. So maybe give us your perspectives on that and how Mother Duck is getting value out of that area.
Sure. So it has a number of different pieces. First of all, is most people don't actually have giant amounts of data. They may believe they have giant amounts of data, but my last job was at product manager for Google BigQuery, and I saw the data volumes that people were using, and big data is actually much more rare than people expect it to be. The second part is when people have big data, they tend to actually use a small piece of it. They use the most recent data. They use a particular customer's amount of data. So actually, the data workloads are not nearly as big as people expect them to be. And then the last piece is also like when you do have big data and you are using big data, like maybe you shouldn't be. Like I think people have sort of turned into data hoarders where they just sort of collect data over and over time, and that it leads to increased cost over time and unnecessarily. So I think at Mother Duck we're trying to sort of capitalize on, at some point this is going to become not sustainable. People are going to realize, hey, well I never used all this data. Why am I keeping it around? I think I saw a report that said 65% of enterprise data is not actually leveraged. And on one hand, it might, some people say, well, we should leverage that data. On the other hand, it's like sort of like the shirt you've had in the back of your closet for 3 years. Like if you haven't worn it in 3 years, like maybe you should just get rid of it.
I'll have to go check my closet because I think I got a lot of excess data there. Rohit, maybe talking about data, play off that. We're talking about data observability and your focus on ROI, that perspective of the big data and how people are driving their transformations.
Yeah, I mean, contrary to sort of what Jordan was saying, we're seeing our customers, especially in telcos and large Fiserv companies, bring close to 0.5 petabyte of data every day. And it's just the nature of things. For example, and probably Jordan is right that you might not use all of that data for all your use cases, but you still have to store all of that for compliance purposes. You still have to report for 7 years past and 3 years most recent.
Right.
So you have to manage all of that data. What's really going on is that the previous generation of data management software, that's actually giving way, just like Netezza and Teradata gave way to Snowflake and Databricks. So I think that is evolving, and I think data observability is a new way to manage all your data, whether it's at rest, in motion, or ready for consumption. And I think that's where things are changing really rapidly for us.
Excellent, excellent. We've touched on data, big data, the storage, the costs. Maybe before we switch maybe to security, Cody, let's talk about from an AI leadership perspective. As you're looking about driving intelligence, how are you perspective on the data usage, the future, and what are the opportunities?
Yeah, great question. So I see it as this is just the beginning of the big data movement. And I think data volumes are going to just kind of grow massively as we think about different modalities of data. Just as a simple kind of example, if we think about 10 million rows of tabular data, that might be small. It's going to be a few megabytes. If we think about 10 million text reviews, maybe you're an e-commerce site, that's going to be tens of gigabytes. And then when we think about images, it's going to be 10 million images is going to be tens of terabytes. And as you can see, even right now, there's cameras over there. We have video feeds coming in. All of these organizations are collecting this data. And up to this point, being able to use this, what is called unstructured data, so that's things like text, audio, images, and videos, have been just kind of a non-starter. But AI, I think, fundamentally allows us to actually make use of that data. Probably the example that's most top of mind is think about ChatGPT. ChatGPT was able to actually process this unstructured text data and create a completely new search experience for consumers and people around the world, and just grew massively. So if you're actually able to kind of harness that data through the power of AI, you can generate tremendous amount of value and just completely new experiences, both internally and externally. So
just Hank, on one just to riff on one thing though,
yeah,
get off. But the one thing I think though that is kind of, we talked about this at lunch, a Bank of America executive said this to me, and I thought it was profound, which is there's really three major user groups there, right? So they have the dashboarders that are the lowest value to them, right? So you have people who just get statistics into a dashboard, click refresh, and they do something. Then you have this self-service world, right, where the idea is that these new technologists, which could be any role in the organization, have self-service access to all of their data to make better decisions, to be more effective in their job. And then you have the third, which is kind of like recommendation engines, next best step, like how do we build machine learning and AI, even though I hate the term AI because I think it's mostly bullshit, but if you have real machine intelligence to derive recommendation engines, what to do, but that's a very small group. It's 200 people at the bank, right? So the largest group is this self-service access, and we're all kind of debating, well, when are we going to get ROI from this large group, right? Because if you look at, remove all the bullshit, marketing from Snowflake, Databricks, Starburst, BigQuery, they just want to converge an enterprise data and expose it to any potential end user. So it's lots of little data sets with many different use cases that we're all hoping, because a lot of you invested a lot of money in these companies, so you're hoping for a return, I hope, and that you're going to get that value, right? So whether it's big data, little data, it's immaterial. I think the question is what's the business ROI that's driving our operations as we shift? Whether it's the core data infrastructure layer, whether it's designed analytics to drive better results, or ultimately it's for the business to make derivative decisions where we're starting to share data, merge data with other corporations to get JVs, and I think that's kind of the future, no matter what vertical you're in,
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. When we look at EY, we're looking at our employment experience and how are they driving that self-service of data, very perspective. Maybe Rohit or Jordan, thinking about that self-service ROI, how are you seeing that grow? How does that promise come through, particularly in this area of focused budgets?
I think we are getting close to it. So I think Matt made some really good points over there. I kind of agree with what Matt says overall, and I would just qualify it a little further, from an ROI perspective, both internal and external. I think, the operating principle has to be determined that, are we serving internal stakeholders or external stakeholders? And I think those data contracts have to be very specific. If you're doing self-serve, then probably you're estimating that the customer or, the internal stakeholder has the ability to go discover what they really want, and they have a good hypothesis of what they want to either prove or disprove. on an ongoing basis. Otherwise, you need a data engineering team which actually creates all of this, and then it's a refresh problem. That am I getting my data accurately every single day or not? That's a different problem. But the question is that the self-serve user is probably a little more informed one and is actually working with certain hypotheses that he's trying to prove or disprove. I think when you have external stakeholders, the contracts are well defined. You've already written. So we work with Dun & Bradstreet, for example, right? And they validate 800 billion data points, ingest data from 40,000 data providers, and supply data to about 20,000 data consumers. And all of these are corporations, by the way. Now, for them, the contracts are very well defined. And therefore, that use case moves slowly, changes slowly, as opposed to the self-serve use case where you're trying to excavate a lot more on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that, I think in pursuit of getting some of this ROI from self-service, I think people have been kind of throwing more and more money at the problem. It's like, oh, we're not getting the answers we want. So clearly, we must need to scale up our infrastructure. We need more tools, more Snowflake, and I think at some point that's just got to stop. Like I think there's a limit to how much people will spend, and I think how much they can spend. And I think people, in order to do that, you just got to get smarter about what you're doing rather than just bigger.
Cody, any views on this ROI question?
Oh, I just completely agree with you, Jordan, about, I think people just kind of, when thinking about maximizing the value of their data, they just try to throw a bunch of tools and infrastructure at it and just try to go from like 0 to 100 like really quick. But ultimately, I think what enterprises need to do and businesses need to do is stay focused. Focus on getting quality right, because there's so many little issues and pitfalls that you can fall into. So being actually smarter about it on a smaller scale, once you find that value, and then actually scaling it up, I think that's how you can actually get ROI much faster and more reliably than just trying to throw a bunch of tools and infrastructure at it.
Great. So I think the summary of this is, in this environment, in the ROI drive, really very focused investments, shorter horizon on ROI, clarity on your user experience. Switch gears a little bit. I'm going to look to you, Matt. Kind of when we talk in the area of data and governance and security around that, there's a little bit of a balance here. We want to create a new experience. We want to enrich our data or expose our data, but we've got privacy, we've got ethics, we've got cyber breaches. So kind of think about, how do you see the security balance in the data landscape?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's a dichotomy between the so classically over the past 3-4 years, you've seen these platform owners, right? So they have budgets for Snowflake or Databricks and cloud infrastructure, and they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, and they're quite powerful in these organizations, and their job is essentially to deliver data to any end user, right, through the self-service model. In contrast, you have kind of the CISO that is quite the opposite. Their job is to control data, control risk for your brand. And so the problem is that we're seeing is about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Snowflake and Databricks were relatively nascent technologies. There were spot use cases, but you weren't seeing an entire bank operate on these technologies, right? You weren't seeing an entire pharmaceutical organization run on it. But now we're starting to see that operational shift, and therefore it's a new attack vector, right? If I'm China, the first thing I'm doing is putting my Chinese intelligence brigades. I'm not going to try to insert myself into your network infrastructure. I'm just going to find a way where you, by accident, exposed an endpoint from Snowflake through a data app, right? It's much more efficient methodology. And so what we're seeing now is how do we actively provide access to data in a self-service manner where your group and role, if I'm a data scientist in this group or I'm certified to get access to data, is no longer good enough to give you access. Right. I have to have non-deterministic methodology to determine risk correlation. And at the same time provide those insights to a CISO from a completely different perspective, right? I'm giving access because they need it, but now I also need to dynamically take control back. And so that's the world we're moving to as we get into production in the cloud, and we're very, very early days. So it'll be kind of fascinating to see it play out, but we're seeing, our customer base that is getting into production with these technologies it is the Fortune 50. So it's not small amounts of data, it's not a few users, it's, essentially our economy at stake. It'll be a very fascinating couple of years ahead of us.
Yeah. Maybe Rohit, maybe some perspectives on the security and landscape?
I mean, overall, the space of governance, that's going to continuously expand. So I think if you just lay down the operating principle, I think nobody is saying that, I'm going to hold back the data. I think the stance for all organizations, especially, Fortune 500, Global 2000, it's very simple that, let's make data accessible to as many stakeholders as possible so that we actually utilize or put that data to use. But, it's not an easy thing. Just like Matt said, security is a challenge. But, let me add a few more. And those are essentially financial governance, because as you move your data to the cloud costs are prohibitive. If you actually drop your guard, we had an investment bank come to us who spent $275,000 on a single SQL query. It's not about, tens of queries, it's just one SQL query that cost them $275,000. And so these accidents are going to repeat. But can you actually prevent in anticipation of those accidents? And the answer is no, because then you're basically not putting your data to use. So I think the whole governance topic is going to convert itself from being just a persistent one-time activity to a more transient multi-time activity and potentially near real time. So you'll have to monitor costs, you'll have to monitor your security posture, but you'll also have to monitor data availability and who can do what with that data. So I think a lot of this is going to change and explode in the next 3 to 5 years.
Awesome. Thank you. Agreed. Jordan, moving over to you. We talked a little bit about the security, kind of thinking about, as we drill down into the cloud and data infrastructure, think about where's the business value being driven and some of the considerations as firms are increasingly making cloud transitions.
So I think, a lot of the value is in actually being able to understand what your data is telling, what your organization is up to, what's happening. And I think especially as in the COVID era, people are more distributed. They're not able to sort of like look into the parking lot and see who's there, what's happening in the cafeterias. You kind of have to understand from a data perspective, like what is what's going on. And like, you can't just say like, okay, I'm collecting all the data and then I'm going to learn from it. There has to be sort of multiple stages of preparation involved in actually kind of winnowing the data down to something that's actually useful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. We're switch gears a little. We talked kind of about the data stack, the data layer, security, the cloud transition. I'm going to go back to you, Cody, kind of talking about the intelligence layer. Kind of thinking out, now that we got our data stack in order, generating the most value, kind of talk about where do you see, I think I want to trip into the AI buzzwords, but kind of drive into that and see, how do you see the opportunities?
Yeah, great question. So first I want to double down that in order to be able to kind of derive value from AI, thoughtful consideration, curation, and preparation of your data is the first thing that you need to do. Because otherwise you can end up kind of with AI like not actually deriving value or kind of actually exposing yourself to risk. So really it does start with thinking about data. But then once you have kind of AI, you can leverage it for maybe taking a step back. There's this general idea of kind of artificial general intelligence, like robots and things like that. And people get fixated on that. I think that where you can derive the most value is actually not thinking about general intelligence, but more vertical, specific, or narrow intelligence. Thinking about use cases where you spend a lot of money now, either through just like kind of manual, tedious labor, initially generating kind of copy. We're seeing a lot of amazing stuff around ChatGPT and things like that. And even like search and use cases around that. I think kind of focused use cases where you can reduce that kind of amount of time and toil that needs to get to a specific value point can be really huge. And it can just make your data like far more useful to everyone, easier to find, and to be able to derive value out of that.
Awesome, thank you. Maybe switch over to you, Matt. We talked a little bit at lunch. We had a great lunch conversation. Almost as good as this conversation. Yeah. We talked a lot about the opportunities in AI. We also talked about the risk in AI, not just the security risk, but some of your experiences kind of around as you're thinking about your AI journey, aligning it and some of the risks around that.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally blown up 8 times because we had a bad model. I actually walked into a house 8 times in a row and had IED drop on me from the 2nd floor of the house. So that kind of sucked. Between Afghanistan and Iraq, we had a bad model that was not trained properly. So literally experienced it. But like when you, most recent example is like with Swedbank, shocking, there was Russian money laundering in the Baltics and their subsidiaries. You could actually look it up, 2018, 2019, their CEO was fired. And it was because their anti-money laundering algorithms were at about a 7 to 9% accuracy rating. And the reason was, it's kind of obvious now, but they couldn't converge their data across all 33 subsidiaries. And so their training sets, even though they had a training set for each country, it couldn't really see the wide swath to provide the accuracy needed, from a KYC perspective to inject on the AML. And so ultimately what happened was they had a very poor AML experience, right? And so I think when you look at like model governance and oversight, the laws of proportionality relative to data, you need to have, one, the governance and controls around it to be able to unify that data, so your training sets and validation sets can be built properly. And then 2 is you have to have KPIs. So MI5 and MI6 have this model called the laws of proportionality of data. So what they do is there's a walking statistic and say, okay, I'll give you 5%, then I'll give you 20%, then I'll give you 30%. Proportionally show me that you're actually getting somewhere with this, and then give you more. And so again, now that's just one method, but again, the point is to have a governance model around how you build machine intelligence, and then you take it to production. And I think that's where we're really immature. Right now, it just feels like a bunch of kids in shorts and some, sandals building some AI because they're wicked smart, but like don't know what the fuck they're doing. And like we've got to take that under control to deliver an operational product. Right.
I was gonna
You're not in shorts though.
I know. I was
Lovely sneakers though.
I'm slowly transitioning, from like PhD version of myself where, wearing flip-flops and shorts. But kind of in thinking about this actually, kind of more seriously, there's this notion in AI and this theorem that's called the no free lunch theorem. And generally kind of like I think this idea is actually very powerful. I think a lot of organizations, and we see this a lot with kind of our customers and users, they kind of assume that like AI is going to solve all of their problems, and they actually can just like, hire like, I don't know, a few PhDs and things like that like did something tangentially related to AI, and that they're going to be able to actually generate a tremendous amount of value in the enterprise. But I've seen this fail time and time again when you just go and hire kind of a few PhDs wearing shorts and sandals, and actually task them with building kind of an enterprise solution that actually works reliably and robustly. I see it basically people can create really nice, compelling demos, but actually going from a demo to operationalizing AI is a completely different story. You have to think about kind of the steps of the data initially, actually observing the model, seeing kind of how it like works in deployment, and then also thinking about the scalability. Because running these AI models, if you're not careful about it, can be super expensive. And I know this firsthand because as a early PhD student, I remember getting called into my advisor's office, and he's like, our AWS bill is $40,000. And as a PhD student, I was like, that is my salary for a year, because of the fact that we weren't thoughtful at the time. And since then, very, very careful and thoughtful about what data we're using, how we're processing it, and being as efficient as possible. And I've seen this firsthand. I created the benchmark that is the industry standard for machine learning performance, ML perf. And over that process, we could see that large organizations were able to reduce the amount of time that it took to train models by close to like over 500x. And actually, kind of the most sophisticated companies were also able to reduce the cost of creating AI models and deploying those models by 20x or more. So actually being thoughtful, getting the right people, and making sure that it's not just a science project, but it's actually a product that's operationalized, that's robust, is the critical piece for actually deriving value.
Yeah, one of the things we've been talking a lot about at EY and in our own AI strategy is the AI models are growing at 6 to 10x what Moore's Law would have predicted. So we're seeing this rapid growth in the operations. So maybe, Jordan, I'm going to look to you. One of your areas was separating the storage versus the analytics. And maybe as you think about this with the AI growth and proliferation, how does that help, how does that separation play out in driving value and security?
Sure. I mean, in the old days, like when you had everything in a single box, if you had more data, you had to grow your compute. You had to buy a separate box. And these days, it's sort of table stakes in analytics and most data processing to separate those things out. And so you can really throw tons and tons of data at the problem. But you need, generally the amount of compute you need has been increasing at a much smaller rate. So partly it's because people have gotten better, but partially the ability to pull data off of disks hasn't gotten faster, and you need you have finite time and finite resources. So I think the big data era, or the era that we're in, has been really subsidized by this separation of storage and compute.
Excellent, thank you. And maybe Rohit, building off of that, we talk a lot about the data supply chain management. We talked a lot about the modern data stack here, and fueling that ultimate experience. How are you thinking about operationalizing, optimizing that supply chain?
Well, you just heard it from the AI experts over here. I think AI potentially can actually turn a SaaS company into a non-SaaS company because your COGS will go up. So that's the effect that badly managed supply chains can actually affect your bottom line. And I think therefore observability as a concept will continue to grow, and we are excited about these trends. But I just want to go back one topic, and then I'll come back to the question that you asked. I think all the excitement against AI is valid, but it's still early days. It's the Tesla Roadster, and it's ways to go before we get the affordable Model 3. But I will tell you that I'm really excited about what is possible from an AI perspective. It's almost like the EC2 service which came from Amazon in 2006. And just look at how that movement took off. So beyond all this hype, there will be some really good applications which will come out, but then the enterprise will have to manage it really well. In terms of, like I outlined at the outset, data volumes will continue to grow. System complexity is going to increase. You'll actually inherit a different kind of fleet. You'll have on-premise, hybrid, private cloud, public cloud, CPUs, GPUs, and God knows what else to manage. Internal stakeholders for data, external stakeholders for data. And if you're basically an SVP of data engineering today, you're holding the team, the selection of technology, and the delivery of data. So the only thing that I can actually see or foresee for many of these is loss of hair. It's going to be really difficult for the next 5 years for these people to deliver.
Yeah, agreed. And I think your point on AI opportunities, and we've been laughing a little bit about that on this panel, is when we look at EY, we look backwards. I mean, the amount of progress we've made in our own applications, our own experiences for employees and customers is significant, and the acceleration and the use cases in our consulting clients is continuing to grow. So it's really lining that up. Hey, I'm going to do 2 quick rounds of questions. We'll go through each of your individuals' views on that. First, as CEOs of companies leading the way in the data environment, and you're looking at your goals and objective over the next year, 1, 2 year, kind of what's on your top priorities around driving that? Where do you see the keys to success, critical success factors? Maybe start with you, Rohit.
Yeah, so our briefs are really down. I think what people are trying to do is enable more people with data, but they are very mindful of the amount of money that they want to spend on it, and they're also very clear that they don't have access to the same resources that they had in the last couple of years. That would be number one. Second, their support for heterogeneity, but also the establishment of a model by which they can administer all these different data systems. So those are 2 key points for us as a company to execute on.
Excellent. Matt?
As I said earlier, I think the ability to calculate ROI early in these infrastructure plays is more and more important. So I think I assume most of you are investors. for investors, I would say is like, I think we're back to the age of platforms. You can't just have a point solution and then sell it at ACV high enough. So you have to provide a platform with multiple different capabilities, multiple different workflows for different personas. So I think that's, for me, number one. I like, we're going to live or die by having a platform with multiple SKUs where we have modules where we can do a true land and expand. I think the second is value-based selling, going top down. The days of being able to get budget, even if you can get budget from like a middle manager in these companies, the problem is your time to close is going to be so long. Your sales force is just going to get like constrained by getting 10 different people to approve. So value-based selling at the C-suite, working its way back down. So platform sales, top-down value-based selling.
Excellent. Jordan?
I think one of the things you're seeing in the database industry is that there's really this sort of just convergence. There are no magic beans. There's no way to really like magically say this database is 10x faster, this database is 10x better. And so the way to differentiate yourself is not speed, it's not size, it's going to be making it easier, making it simpler for people to get more results more easily, and broaden the base. So that, we're primarily focused on getting as many people to be able to leverage their data as possible, and focusing on that rather than if we can bring value to organizations, then revenue will follow.
I would say being empathetic for your customers, realizing that organizations have kind of many different heads and many different arms and aren't necessarily talking to one another, especially when we think about the people that own the data and then the people that could use or benefit from the data. We kind of see this process kind of all over the place where we're almost coming into an organization. We talk with the data folks, we talk with the end users, and we actually almost end up helping them see how they can drive value to their users. So really being empathetic for the fact that these organizations, there's many different heads, many different people that kind of bring together to actually create value, especially when you're thinking about data and the fact that oftentimes the owner of the data and the user can be separated. And then the other thing is just kind of double clicking on like focusing on kind of fundamentals and deriving value. Like right now, I think there's an explosion of kind of noise and a bunch of different vendors, and people are trying to just figure out what is going on in this space. Being able to actually have kind of a clear story around that and help your customers, help enterprises actually understand the landscape and where you fit in and how do you derive value has just been critical for us.
Awesome. Now I'm going to take that was a 1 to 2 year horizon, kind of where we're in this environment. Let's imagine now we're at the 25th anniversary of the Montgomery Summit, and the panel is how we've maximized the value of data, and really kind of pull that forward. And let's use that probably just as a guise as what's worked for our customers and what would be the hot topic for the investor community there. So a little bit lengthen the cycle out, a little bit bolder predictions, and what would be the topics? And I'll start with you again, Rohit.
I think it's an interesting question, and I think the projection is as follows. I think data-driven companies would kill it. They will own the market, but that would mean that they've actually put all the data to use at the places that they needed to. And what does that mean? It essentially means that they've actually monetized all the data. They've actually made sure that they've hawked it enough to internal and external stakeholders, and those companies are going to win. And if you draw back from that, then the companies that enable these companies to monetize their data and to build and operate great data products will eventually be the winners.
Awesome. Thank you. Matt.
100% agree with that. I mean, I think, ultimately the complete convergence of the potential data. So that means large-scale data exchange between any corporation virtually. But so what I would say is I think that's going to happen though in the next 24 months, because I don't think they have a choice. So ultimately, I'd say in 5 years though is the gray area that is between enterprise data and consumer data is going to kind of converge. And I think all Global 2000 companies are going to struggle with that because ultimately there's just going to be brand and reputational risk that's going to have to be dealt with, and I have no clue how we're going to figure that one out. So, invest in something, I guess. I don't know. Do your job.
Jordan, same question. Crystal ball.
So I think that like the kind of the flip side of sort of the end of big data is like actually data generation is not slowing down. Like in the next 5 years, there's going to be 10x more data created. The important part of it is if there's 10 times more data, we're not going to want to spend 10 times more on our data infrastructure. We're going to have to figure out a way to cut that dramatically. And so I think in 5 years we're going to have to figure out how to get not be so attached to all of this sort of data exhaust that we're creating.
Cody.
Yeah. One quote that I love is that people often overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5 years. And I think that's very true as we think about the 25th anniversary of this event. So I think data is just going to explode. Like the amount of data and volume that we can collect is going to be just massive because generation has gotten like much easier, both in terms of kind of traditional structured data, but then also like just the ocean of data that is unstructured data as people can like generate content more easily with things like ChatGPT and Stable Diffusion. I also think because of this kind of new focus and new modality of data, like the conversation of data and AI are going to be kind of almost one and the same, kind of fused together, because I think that in order to actually make use of this massive amount of data, you can't rely on human beings anymore to scale with that. And there is going to have to be some AI, ML component to that. And everyone's going to be wrestling with, not the data transformation, but what's the AI transformation, and helping enterprises through that.
So I have I was struck by a quote, which we had this vision of a future, and I'm going to go back probably 50 years. It was Edwards Deming said, "In God we trust, all others bring data." So this view of the future that we really, in all of our decisions, customer, employee, client, B2B, B2C, that convergence, the data driving that maximization, but also getting our data usage scaling under control, the idea of an exchange of data. I really like that concept, Matt, around the B2B, the enterprise and the customer, how that's pulling together, and the security around that, as well as just scaling the sheer volumes of that into the AI. So I want to thank you for all your attention. I want to thank my panelists for all their insights, both in the next near-term opportunities and as we look at the future for maximizing your data. Thank you all.